Welcome to the Agent Boost podcast. As you can tell, we're upgrading our set. It's always getting better and better each week. And today is the first week of AEP. So if we're a little bit out of it or discombobulated, it's because we've been going through annual enrollment. So what do we want to talk today about, brother?
Just how it's going so far, quick observations, things of that nature. Every AEP feels a little bit different. So I guess I would start with that before we start talking some of the other anything. So I would say my first thing I'm kicking off with, I've already noticed, and it's not just our org, it's others, that this new disclaimer, I'm already noticing that I think there's going to be two types of agents and agencies and call centers, those that are very much trying to follow the rules and all these new guidelines, and those that are not. And I think there's just two schools of thought, like, hey, either I'm going to try to follow all these rules, and if you do so, it probably is costing the average agent and organization about 20% of their sales if you're really striving to follow all those guidelines. And those that are just kind of like, I'm going to kind of follow those rules and fly by the seat of my pants and just do kind of whatever, and hopefully it doesn't blow back on me. They are going to continue to do that, and we'll see how it works out for them. But that's kind of my observation so far. So I would just say it's been worse than I even thought it would be with the 48-hour scope rule, particularly for those doing phone enrollments. And even, you field agents out there, it still sucks because there's a lot of confusion about, well, do I have to do this 48-hour scope if it's already my existing client? And do all these phone calls need to be recorded, every single one, even when it's a 20-minute conversation about, rapport and relationship, but then they ask that one question about their current plan? I mean, so the 48-hour scope thing sucks as bad as we thought. And then lastly, the new disclaimer, I don't mind that it's in there, but like my opinion from the get, and I had given this feedback to carriers and said, hey, run up the ladder to CMS. I'm okay if you're adding additional disclosures or disclaimers, add it to the statement of understanding at the end. Mm-hmm. But trying to start off a sales interaction within the first minute and saying, hey, like, what is the disclaimer again? Like, oh, this is so-and-so with this agency, and I'm a non-government agency, and I'm contracted and approved to represent this many carriers and this many plans in your areas. Do I have your permission to proceed? It's such an not even sales, but just hard to even have a normalized conversation and build rapport when right out of the gate within the first minute, it's like you're trying to scare the hell out of them and talk yourself out of a sale in the very first minute. So that's my first observation.
Yeah, especially if you're doing, any outreach. I mean, really, it's the inbound calls, it's any outbound calls, it's calls to current clients for agents. Anybody doing stuff virtually, we're seeing. It's an obstacle and an objection that you're overcoming right from the very beginning.
Yeah, we've even had agents that have been doing this for years, that have been in the industry for a decade, and they're calling their existing clients and trying to follow the rules, and they're like, "Why are you being weird with me? Like, why are you
saying these weird things?
That's bizarre, and it's off-putting, and they don't like it." So, I don't know if this trickles down to CMS or anybody else listening, it's not, I understand like intent of implementing rules, but so far, all the feedback I'm hearing, it's not just the agents, that feels very unnatural and it's not good. It's also not creating a great experience for the Medicare beneficiary either. So
it is confusing. It's convoluted, just as we knew it would be. And we've dealt with years and years of compliance and had things in the past before, but I think this year is taking the cake at least as far as anybody that's doing things telephonically or virtually. There's almost so many things for agents to remember right now that it's like we have our anatomy of a compliance call checklist, and we literally have, it looks like a Denny's menu of all the things that you've got to check off.
A Cheesecake Factory menu.
Yeah, whatever's the biggest, longest menu of check items that you could do to make sure that you're covering to stay compliant. But even for like a field agent, you're like, am I recording the sales organization? Did I have my 48-hour scope? Do I, all these things that I've got to cover? It's just become very, very cumbersome, and it's always like the top of your mind, the presence of mind. So I think you're right. I think agents are going to, either just completely disregard it and cross their fingers and hope that
I don't get a CTM. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we know, it takes CMS a while and the carriers after AEP ends before they can start sifting through the wreckage and start responding to all of the CTMs and things like that. So I think we'll know a little bit, after the first of the year, but probably we won't really know how bad this affected everybody and what the compliance adherence is until probably summertime when, people start getting those allegations and things.
I would still say, like, we talk so much about agent types on this pod, so I don't want to always dwell on it and go back and forth, but there are very distinct differences in how a traditional older school agent does business versus an agent who's doing everything over the phone. It is different, and there's hybrid agents, but I will say that if CMS's intent was to stifle and stymie and slow down the call centers and everything else, high five, congratulations,
Yep.
You succeeded, because it has been quite painful. And to the field agents, even though they're going through a lot of pain trying to do this, some of them are still like, you know what, I'm going back to paper applications, and I'm going to, if I am still a little murky about certain things, I don't want to get caught, doing something that I shouldn't, even though I'm not trying to be malicious. I'm trying to follow the rules. It's confusing. I'm just going to go back to writing paper apps. And I think you have that too, which is not a win for anybody when you have agents trying to do business, rewind the clock 10 years, go back to faxing applications and having to do manual work at the carriers, longer to populate in your portals, longer enrollment times. It's not a win. So
yeah, the other thing I'm seeing is some of the enrollment mechanisms for agents doing stuff virtually, like sending the app for them to e-sign via email or text message. A lot of agents are going back to that, and I think there's a lot of service work where it's like, hey, or the kind of the lay down sales where they know it's going to go that way. I actually think agents are going to shortcut a lot of the explanation and a lot of the customer service and a lot of the personal touch, because they're just going to be like, oh, this is so much red tape to jump through. Here, I'll just send you this link and you just fill it out yourself and enroll yourself. And then there's probably going to be a lot of questions that didn't get answered, a lot of service work. And it just is like, well, I'm going to take the safe route and make sure I'm compliant and I'm covered. And this isn't going to blow back on me. And I'm just going to email you this scope and this enrollment for you to sign.
Yeah, here's that plan we kind of talked about here, but I'm going to send you a link, whether it's Sunfire or Connecture.
Yep.
I'm going to text this to you. Go ahead and self-enroll. And then so it's like, hey, they're unhappy and there's a complaint, in OEP. It's February or March and someone's not happy. You're like, I don't know. Yeah, they called me. I answered some questions. They self-enrolled. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Just to kind of absolve themselves of a lot of the compliance.
The other thing that I'm seeing, just kind of anecdotally and reading forums and talking to agents and listening to things on the call floor, and is that it does seem like we've been talking for the past few years, the mass amount of enrollments and the significance in the overall year-over-year enrollments during annual enrollment seem to be kind of trending downward again. Like it's usually seems like that the amount or the percentage of enrollments that carriers take in on a year-over basis, it used to be 60% or higher of their enrollments were done during annual enrollment, and that's kind of trended downward every year. And I think as we haven't really had a lot of enforcement of SEPs, and a lot of people have kind of just been doing business as normal year over year, it's almost kind of broken the mindset of the Medicare consumer too, where they don't have that, it's October, the weather's changing, it's getting colder, it's time to look into my insurance plan. It's almost like, it's not as like pressing. I can pretty much probably do it anytime. I do feel like that's kind of a little bit of sentiment that's creeping into the industry too.
Oh, 100%. I think that you can't have it both ways, right? In the sense that with, CMS over these last for 4 years now, pretty much it's been almost open-ended enrollment periods. And even still, as they're cracking down on DSTs, those enrollment codes, you have SPAPs, you have more 5-star plans, you have all the agents, and then you have a growing segment of the population with FPL that are starting to qualify for Medicaid. You have partials. So there's it used to be that it was so hard to write business outside of the open enrollment period. And over the last 4 years, you can just do business as usual all the time, to where if you have a broker who's writing 400 apps a year, 250, 300 of them are done throughout the year, and only 100 is done during AEP. So it's kind of like a a little production spike or an uptick, but it's not like they're hanging their hat on, 60% of their sales. So I agree. Yep. And it's weird. I see all these things on, LinkedIn and, all the social pages, people making, the memes and, hey, happy, it's AEP. Yeah. Like happy, it's go time. It's kind of like what you're just going to, you're working now and you just weren't working all year. So the sentiment is what you were driving Uber all year. And now suddenly you're going to like get out your briefcase and go sell during AEP suddenly. And I actually even had the conversation with an agency owner this week where, they have a huge book of business and they have about like 1,800 clients. And the whole point is they're not excited for AEP for them because, that's not when they make their money. Because if you've got 1,800 clients, you spend your whole AEP working your butt off.
Playing defense.
Yeah, trying to just enroll more people than you're going to lose. And as long as you can net out or have 10, 20, 50 more enrollments, you work yourself to the bone for 2 months just trying to save your membership. And the gain that they actually have is throughout the year, all those lock-in months and all that business that they're slowly stacking throughout the year. And AEP actually sucks for them.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see when we start hearing from our carrier partners and friends how things are shaking out. But I do think that there was a lot of disruption, and it seems like a lot of agents and agencies, there's, even if you look at our local market, there was quite a few SARs and planny limbs and agents that had to, save and salvage and move and flip a lot of their books. And then with the new compliance, things like that, I wonder how much net growth. It wouldn't surprise me if, again, when things kind of, the dust settles, carriers take more apps during OEP than they did during AEP. And I know that's kind of been like a moving trend.
Of course, I will say if you combine, going into next year, and I already know it, if you combine OEP with lock-in, they're going to get more business than they will from AEP.
Yeah, outside of AEP.
Yeah, guaranteed. More business is actually written in those 9 months out of the year than these 3 months that we have, 2.5 months during.
Yeah,
I agree.
One of the things that we've seen for agents that are having a great kickoff, success.
Before you go there, I will say also trend. Well, actually, go ahead, and then I want to talk carriers and what I'm already seeing like trends of carriers already out of the gates winning, and some that I'm already seeing like, I'm kind of concerned about.
One of our take homes again was the importance of pre-AEP and that October 1st through the October 15th not. I don't want to say pre-enrollment, but where you can talk about plan benefits. You should be servicing your book of business. The agents who maximized that time and had a good AEP and had a lot of sales teed up, ready to close after the 15th and handled their books of business and things like that. Again, just like always, those agents are the ones who had a great jump-off point for annual enrollment, and those are the ones who are going to, really crush their goals.
But they also probably didn't do their certs on September 18th. They probably got their certs done sooner. They probably had a much more organized plan. They probably executed. That's one example that you're using of something that certain agents executed and did much better about than others. But the thing I'm always like, bringing in being like a parent and the things I tell my kids, but I'm like, how you do the little things is how you'll do the big things. And that's like one of those messages I always tell my kids is like, hey, if you're lazy at making your bed and your room's like, that's how everything's going to be in your life. If you don't consider other people and you're selfish and that's all these little things that go into like these what builds your character and these little characteristics and things that you do, you become the sum of all of it. And so I just think that's a little perfect part of it.
Yeah, and to that point, we joke about it every year, but it's hilarious in a bad way, the amount of agents, we call it crawling out of the woodworks. It's amazing the amount of agents that you don't hear from all year long, or you thought, because we have thousands of agents under the distribution, right? That you're like, oh, good to hear from you. I didn't know you were still in the business. So it's October 16th now, and you're ready to sell. You just got your AHIP done, huh?
Well,
there's not a lot of opportunities for you.
The scarier thing is when they were like, oh yeah, man, I'm sending everybody to this, member meeting, and I'm doing this educational meeting, and I'm following up right behind with the sales meeting. I'm like, oh no, like you can't do that anymore.
You're like, you didn't pay attention.
You didn't, obviously, you've not stayed engaged in the industry. That's now a no-no. You can't do that, So that's the other challenge with it too, is when people it's changed so much so quick that if you are not cognizant and you're not watching the changes that are happening, literally from one enrollment year to the next, there's been so many changes that you're just not up on it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of people that, still have that idea that they can show up on the doorstep of annual enrollment and have some sort of effectiveness, but they're not trained. They're not up to date with the industry changes. The marketplace is so dynamic and changing every year. And then their books of business or their prospects or where they're going to get leads, they're unprepared. And of course they're usually set up to not have a very productive AEP.
And for the record, we always tell people, do X, Y, Z, be prepared, do all. But nonetheless, if an agent still runs to us on October 21st and is like, I'm ready to go now, we'll still do everything we can within our power to bend over backwards and try to accommodate and, do what we can with what we have to work with and try to help them and make them successful. But it's just, the expectation is always that, hey, we're going to throw a Hail Mary here and try to help you, but we're limited in how much we can do at this point.
Yeah.
But the other thing I want to talk about was, carriers, and that we kind of knew this going in. There's always that up and down, but I've already noticed out of the gate, I'm going to say it. I always call them the big three, right? It's United, Humana, and Aetna, the larger players that have the most membership. There's also that correlation, the carriers that have the good star ratings and did better with MLRs.
Yep.
This is one of those like painful years for the other carriers, the ones that, there wasn't as, all these podcasts, we talk about MLRs and HEDIS and stars, but it all matters. I mean, I hope people are starting to understand that, but the smaller carriers and the ones that, didn't operationally have their stuff together are really suffering this year. And I think that they're going to kind of have somewhat of a bloodbath, and it's hard to say like the rich get richer, but these big carriers, I see United, Aetna, and Humana all having big enrollment years, growing and having a lot more membership. And obviously those economies of scale, vertical integration that they all have, they're going to continue to be more powerful. And these smaller carriers and regional carriers are having a more challenging year, this environment, than they've probably had in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I think right now.
Yep. It's kind of those who are operating pre-COVID and those who really kind of got big during COVID or post-COVID. It seems like they weren't used to. It's like the analogy of from the Bible or something, Joseph in the storehouse, and
they didn't know any different.
Yeah, the other carriers knew. Omar's laughing. He likes my biblical analogy. They didn't know to prepare for the leaner times when the famines come in, and they just, like you said, they don't have the context of playing the long game, and they were a little bit more cautious when everybody else was deploying all their capital and gaining this market share. They had that slow, stable, consistent growth. And you're right, the bigs are going to get bigger. We see Aetna's coming out pretty strong across the country. Generally, I think Aetna's going to have CVS Aetna's going to have a good year. Humana, we're doing really well with. They're a great partner in UHC as well. A lot of business. And I think everybody that you just talked about, the small local carriers, the ones where maybe beneficiaries were like, well, I do like this little guy, and they do offer, they're giving me this little extra benefit here or this boutique type benefit. And then when that kind of, takes a fall, so to say, with their stars and the funding goes down and things start changing, I think the people are like, well, I'll just go back to the
they get presented with those financial challenges and they have to start cutting network, not renew this contract. And they have network disruption. They have, it's not just line item benefits. Sometimes it's staffing too. And I mean, that is one thing we saw a lot. I actually like it. Like as a distributor, FMO, IMO, one of the things that happened this year as well is a lot of these carriers, they went through multiple RIFs, right? Reduction in force for those listening, RIF. So you go through a reduction in force, and we saw a lot of these big carriers going through 2 or 3 waves of it this year where hundreds of people were losing their jobs. And the whole idea being that, they can do more with less, and they're, having one person be responsible for 2 states or multiple markets, manage it that way. They're spread a little bit more thin. And I actually think like for our industry, that's a signal to us that we've always been somebody that's very involved in the business, involved in the everything from compliance to marketing to strategy, hand-holding agents and helping them achieve their objectives. And it just signals that that's the proper role that we should be playing.
Yeah.
And that it means that as FMOs and distributors, these carriers are going to have a higher expectation to say, hey, we've cut our staff by 10, 15, 20%, which means y'all need to step up and do your job and earn your pay and work with this distribution and help them. So I think it's a good signal to us, and it's a smart move by those carriers to cut those people. But some of you are probably noticing that in your markets, that there's just less broker managers, there's less directors, there's less infrastructure there within the carrier to support you as well.
Tightening the belt for sure.
Yeah.
One of the other carriers I think that we work with, that I see that's kind of the smaller mid-size that's doing well, popping, is Devoted. They just came out and have a few more plans in markets with 5-star. Like you talked about, those MLRs and the funding, anybody that survived and stayed 4-star or above, those guys are the ones that are going to be winning and adding membership this year. And so I'm seeing those guys pop and spike. I think they'll probably have a pretty good proportionate growth year as well.
And I'd agree. And and obviously I think there's carriers that I'm, looking at more than just the partnership and everything else. I'm looking at the actual benefits, the plan design, the technology, the everything. And I think there's some that are in a lot of pain, but I'm certainly not going to go and let's not name names as who's going to get beat up this year. Like, we can give our shout outs, but we definitely don't want to, kick them while they're down. So.
Yeah. We'll let that lie. Sleeping dogs lie.
Exactly. The other thing, I don't know if we're ready yet. I want to talk about like a little bit and start segueing into, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on AEP and observations so far, but I wanted to start talking a little bit about broker commissions a little bit too, with Medicare and with ACA a little bit, because, I think that's, in my observation at least, that is a hot button issue. People's money, always.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I think we'll have more context on AEP and how things are shaking out next week anyway, so we might as well, put out some good long-term bookable content for commissions that people can go back and reference, this episode and learn. But I think that agents understanding how they get paid, why, when, and all the nuances there is a key component to if an agent is actually able to navigate this industry and be successful or not.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, the first thing I would say is the reason I'm bringing up commissions right now in AEP is, of course, there's different commissions and revenue types, and I try to explain this to agents. You have your commissions, but then there's also things that carriers do, spiffs, bonuses, extra, whether it's MRP money from Humana or bonus dollars or field marketing agreements or whatever you call it. Carriers usually have some bonus marketing money out there somewhere, and it's one-time money, that they have to spend as well. You have money and revenues from like HRAs or VBEs that people are completing out there. So there's multiple different revenue types, and
gas reimbursements or marketing reimbursements, all that. Yeah.
Co-op from their FMO. So there's these different revenue types, and I always try to tell agents, like, we as a company try to track every dollar to say, what line of business did this dollar come from? And then, is this dollar going to be recurring revenue? Should we expect more of this particular transaction or policy in the future? If so, how much? Because sometimes you have your year one amount and then years two and thereafter. Or is this a one-time dollar? So we all track that as a business, and I just share that on the podcast because, as all agents out there listening, you should also be doing the same, where you're trying to at least account for in a professional and proper bookkeeping methodology of, this is this dollar, here's what I received it for, and do I expect more in the future, so you can make better decisions. So, and I think I'm bringing up the commissions now because when it comes to administrative fees, bonuses, things like that, carriers can pay those out, but CMS doesn't allow agent Medicare commissions to be paid right now, because all the business that agents are writing in October and November and part of December, if they have a 1/1 effective date, then all those commissions get held, and they're not paid out to the agent until January. And some carriers are better about paying than others. Like, I can tell you, like United Healthcare, it's like the first or the 2nd of January, the day after the holiday, practically 9:58 a.m. on the dot, and like money's in the account. There's others that are not paying that until February, or
holding on to that
March,
as long as they can,
April.
compliance-wise.
Yeah, it depends on the carrier.
Yeah,
So.
I think that, you know, to kind of set the table and maybe back up a little bit, I think in our role, the two biggest obstacles and the reasons why agents fail are essentially tied together. It's they get into the industry and they don't have a financial structure or ability to weather the transition into the industry. And two, there's some very difficult compensation mechanisms in this industry that make the income slow. And you say it's the best get rich slow scheme. But what I see, and the biggest reason why agents fail across the board, is they get into this industry, they try to be an independent agent, they don't have enough money saved up, they don't have, it's like starting a business without being properly capitalized. They don't give themselves an opportunity to be successful. And then when you factor in some of the very difficult, different situations, especially on the Medicare side of things, you have two components to that. You have the fact that now we prorate commissions throughout the year, which did not used to be the case historically. That kind of was changed about 4 years ago, you know, almost off the cusp, but that made it
It's interesting how it was slid in like no big deal. It
Yep.
was huge, but there was not a lot of noise about that.
Yeah, and that was a major barrier to entry permanently for this industry. And then the other component of that is during the most productive, busiest time of the year, annual enrollment, you essentially have to go 3 straight months with making almost no money.
Well, and so we try to hedge that, right? So it's, and I bring that up because to your point, let's say you're an agent, you're going through AEP, and you're crushing it. You're writing all this business. That's great. You still have bills to pay right now. So if you're a newer agent that just was in this year or last year, you're building, the only way to get revenue is to sell those HRAs, which are going to keep paying through. And then obviously if you sell like an 11-1 or a 12-1 effective, they're going to pay that out, but it's prorated to crap, right?
Yep.
So you get this tiny little commission, you get your HRAs. It's just money's tight during Q4. So it just is kind of frustrating to be out there working so hard, seeing your wins, writing all this business, and then seeing, you know, the bank account, you know, in the negative or in the red.
Yep.
So that is very demoralizing and demotivating for a lot of agents. And to your point too, we've had agents get in the business that are crushing it in summer. You know, they get in the business after OEP, let's say it's March, April, June. By the time they actually start selling policies, they're writing 20, 30 a month. But it's a 8-1, 9-1 effective date, 10-1.
I have a surprise for you after this podcast because there's someone we're going to talk about that you would think that it would work, but as the prorations start coming in, even if they're writing a lot of business, it gets very, very difficult at this time of year because now you're making a commission. You know, you're making, what is the FMB right now, $24.75 per member per month. So if you're writing an 11-1 effective, you're essentially making $49.
I know.
And if it's a true up,
you can go flip burgers in and out.
You're
going to
make you're going to make $98.
Yeah.
And that's not as, you could go DoorDash some hamburgers for a few hours and be making more money than that, you know, at least up front.
That's the hard thing, is that trying to tell, you know, CMS and carriers and say, hey, try to go find good labor and someone that's competent and is going to be a professional and be able to be smart enough to get not only their license, but every certification, and then be dynamic and train them with AHIP and then do 9 different carrier certifications and understand a PPO versus an HMO, and then also network and, you can use, you're on CAID? Well then, here's a PPO. Yeah, you can go, just kidding. You can't go anywhere. You still have to stay in your Medicaid network. Understanding a sliding scale of a SLIMB versus a QUIMBY. And, you know, this is how it works with TRICARE and VA. I mean, the level of sophistication it takes a good agent to understand. And then you're trying to get them in the industry and paying them prorated commissions. It's a miss. We'll just put it that way.
And like you said, we actually talked about that this morning, that the level of sophistication and quality and caliber and integrity and work ethic of an agent that it takes to be able to sell Medicare products. And then you layer in the compliance where you've got to be above board. You know, of course, that's what you want to be. But then you also have to have people that can mentally and psychologically navigate all of those ingredients together, where you have an overly aggressive regulatory and compliance industry, a very sophisticated product mix that's becoming ever increasingly dynamic every year, and then you pair that with a very slow compensation model that slowly builds up. It's very difficult, and it makes our job really hard too, because we're always trying to figure out how to solve those issues for agents. But sometimes it's like, man, it's a lot easier to go sign up for a gig app and make dollar bills in my bank account tomorrow. Right. Or, you find some good sales kids, and it's pretty easy to teach them to go, hey, did you notice that sign in your neighbor's yard? Mm-hmm. I'm actually the one that put that there. Let me help protect your home. Or what is that a good alarm pitch, Omar? We've sold a lot of stuff door to door, right? It's a lot.
Hey, don't
harder.
sell yourself short, Omar. Don't cut yourself out of this either.
It's a lot harder to teach somebody, like you just talked about. Hey, let me get you licensed in multiple states. Let me teach you all about these nuances. You've got to have a professional license. You've got to get licensed in all these different states. Or, you can go out and knock doors and set solar appointments and make, money
$150K
at the end of this week, and then have to sell a different version of that where it's like, I hear you, but you're eventually going to get sick of that. And if you do it the same amount of time, you're actually going to make way more money long term, and it's going to be a way more enjoyable lifestyle than you.
I know. Frequently I'm like, I hear what you're saying. You're making like $150,000 a year doing that, and it's the easy button. But yeah, to your point, in 3 or 4 years, you're going to be burned out. And long term, you're going to build a lot more in revenue doing Medicare, but it's going to suck for 2 or 3 years. It's a not very appealing of a sales pitch. But yeah, so that is the one thing I would say about the Medicare commissions right now. So just understand, like, I will actually, again, call out like United Healthcare. I like the way they do it, in that even if you log into your portal right now and you see all your sales, it will show held transactions. And that's one thing that I do like about it, is even though they can't pay it out yet, they at least account for all the sales that agents are making. It's a different tab in their commissions. In Jarvis, if you download your commission statements, it will show all your policies that are there and show what your future payment's going to be. So I do like that they do that.
So let's give our advice to agents. If you're a Medicare selling agent, what is your advice to how they should manage their funds and their commissions for their first year or two?
So obviously we always say, sell, 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 sell. The more you sell, the more revenue there is. And I always am conservative with every forecast I do. I would say if agents are going to go independent, they have to run it just like any other business. Like if I were to go open up a restaurant, I'm going to have to usually go get a loan or have a ton of capital. I'm going to have to get a lease space. I'm going to have equipment that I have to buy. I'm going to have to train staff. I'm going to have to source, carry inventory. I'm going to have to do all these things before I actually open up, get patrons in, have them start spending revenue. And I might be anywhere from a few months to a few years before I'm actually recouping all that investment and making cash. And it's like that with any business. It could be a construction business, could be restaurant business, whatever. So I think the same expectation agents need to have, in that you're not just saying like, hey, this is going to be my job and I'm going to be an insurance agent. You need some sort of money and capital in order to survive what we're talking about if they're going to be independent agents. And they need, months of reserves of cash, because again, going back to even the tale of when carriers pay commissions, some of them are great and they pay right away. I have other carriers that I absolutely loathe and despise the way that they pay, because they pay the month after a policy is effective. Mm-hmm. So we have some brokers that are even, you write an agent, someone turning 65, and let's say it's April, and I write a July 1, I'm not going to see the money from that until August. And then it's the initial money, and then the true up after, it might be 5 months before I get all my money from selling that policy. That's a freaking long accounts receivable to sit there and carry. And if you had costs on the front end, like buying leads or other expenses to generate the business, you have to put out all the money on the front end and then wait multiple months to see the revenue and recoup it. Yep. So that's hard. So as far as advice goes, make sure if you're going to be an independent agent, make sure you have plenty of capital saved and you can survive doing that, or have a very good defined plan where you have another source of income, whether that be from a spouse that has income or whether that's you working 2 jobs, and you're able to balance and do both effectively in order to bridge the gap for some period of time to when you can be fully independent. That would be my advice.
But let me add on to that, because now's a perfect time to talk about it with annual enrollment, because you basically have a couple seasons of money in this business, right? And annual enrollment is a time where you can potentially make a lot of money. I mean, we've always made a lot of money historically when we were personally producing during annual enrollment. And that's one of the reasons why people get into this industry, is because, we reference like door-to-door sales and things like that. A lot of those people will go sell in the summer and they'll go work really hard for 4 months, 12 hours a day, knocking doors to make their 100K. You can do that in annual enrollment. Here's one of the things I would say. Go hard during annual enrollment and live lean. Beans and rice, rice and beans, Dave Ramsey it during that annual enrollment. We find it hard because it's Christmas time, and it's actually the Q4 generally for a lot of people is taxes and Q4 and Christmas, and they have a lot of expenses. It's very, very difficult, okay? When you get that big lump of money, when you get that big war chest of money from annual enrollment in Q1 in January, let's say an agent really crushed it and got $50,000. Well, what do we advise that agent to do? We say that money is not your money yet. Like that is savings. Put that aside. That's not your win, because what will happen is a lot of agents are like, new car, family cruise, buying this, and that money goes to pretty much zero, okay?
And their tax bill's due in April.
Yep. And, oh, wait, I'm an independent agent. I didn't pay any taxes on that. However, you put that money aside, you save it. Now you're in open enrollment.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
So you're using your example. You get a $50,000 lump sum in January. Great. You know what? Treat yourself. Spend $5,000 of the $50,000. Do something. Or, if you were me, it's like I was taking every little bit I could to pay off debt back in those days and pay that snowball or whatever. But take a little bit to reward yourself for your hard work, but don't blow it all, please don't. And to your point, even too, the other thing is you're a business owner. This is the other thing. People say like, there's $100 in my business account. I'm sweeping those $100 into my personal wallet.
Yep.
You can't work that way, where you have to leave operating capital into the business, because even if you're not operating a brick and mortar with employees, you still have to pay for your you still have to pay for leads, you still have to pay for licenses and have those expenses, and you still have chargebacks that you're going to get from carriers, and all those other expenses that you're going to have along the way.
Yep. So what I would say is, hypothetically, and we were talking earlier, that open enrollment, you can write almost as many apps during open enrollment, if not as many apps in open enrollment as you are during AEP. Continue to build that war chest of money. Let's say you're making 10, 15, 20,000 if you're a high-end producer. Keep building to that war chest. Keep, taking out what you're budgeted for your bills. And then starting after open enrollment ends, you start getting prorated commissions where it starts getting paid noticeably different. And for those of you who may be a new agent, let's say, FMB is $300, like $301.25 or
$311. How much is it in 2024?
$311.
I don't know, $6.
Right. Okay. So that breaks down to like $25.25.
It's not enough. Whatever it is, it's not enough.
Okay. So you're doing a plan change, and all of a sudden you're doing a 4/1 effective. You're only getting paid 9 times that $25. So, and if it's a true up, they true up. Most of the carriers, I think this is criminal, prorate the true up as well. So you're not making, you're starting to make less and less money now. So you still have to keep working hard, working consistently, because by the time you're getting to that August, September zone where your commissions are really getting prorated, what's happened a lot of times with agents, even successful agents, they spent their AEP money, they spent their OEP money, they were kind of like leveling out middle of the summer, and then now it's Q3 and Q4, and they're in the danger zone. Yep. And they're off. Somehow they have no money, they have no residuals yet as a first-year agent, and they're out on the streets again. And that is a very, very common, it's a tale as old as time in our business. We've had this conversation.
I always say that, right?
Yeah.
My crystal ball is kind of hazy, except for when it comes to that, I see crystal clear, like exactly that happening.
We see that happening, and usually it happens even faster than we thought it would happen for those particular agents.
It's a bad, and you bring up a very important part, because all this cash comes in January, and OEP, they're not really prorated yet, because most of them don't start prorating until 4/1. And then, again, they're still having that huge chunk of cash. They're making all that money in OEP, and you're right. And then usually we see that during summertime, for a lot of people who have families, their kids are out of school, they're taking a vacation, and they're kind of taking their foot off the gas too. So not only are you getting lower commission rates, but you're also getting a lower volume of sales for a lot of agents. And
they're
that's
spending all that money on their summer vacations
it's
and
just
on all their
compounding effect. And then you get into like this August, September phase of the year when you need to have cash to spend on vendors, to go invest in your business, to go have a good AEP. And not only do people not have the capital to go spend on the business, but they don't even have money to pay their bills.
Yep.
And then they're almost looking for another job or another gig. And instead of focusing on something that they could grow that would be massive, they're unfortunately having to make the bad decision of, I have bills to pay now and I'm not spending my time into my business. I'm having to go get a job.
And now you see why it's 90% of agents that get licensed are no longer in the business within 2 years. Okay. However, let's say that agent saved that money. They go through and they're in their second AEP. They crush it again. They save that money. They add that war chest in now, and they've got a bigger savings account, or they just replenished and added on to their savings account there. But now they have residuals kicking in, and they wrote maybe 100 or 200 throughout the year, and now they're getting paid their residual on those, and they've got a $2,500 to $5,000 monthly residual amount. And now they're personally producing. You're in a completely different situation financially. Rinse and repeat year over year.
They're over the hump.
They're over the hump. But what happens is just so few people, so they're either not producing enough up front or they go through that cycle. So for any of you who may be listening during AEP, maybe that's some advice for you to help you get into a better situation, financially. And of course, there's other things that you can do to level that out. Sell some ancillary products that pay up front. Maybe you're selling some life products or some ancillary products that are paying. And that's the other piece of advice that I would give people is know your numbers and know your commissions, because we've always been really good at knowing I'm going to get paid this exact amount of money. Okay, well, how much revenue do I need to make this month in August? Well, maybe I can't just focus on changing all these LIS DSNP people, because I'm only getting a very small commission. I need to go focus on writing some new to Medicare where I can get a full first year commission up front. And I need to go focus on getting some T65s and shift and allocate my business that way. So you have to be smart and strategic. You can't just kind of go throughout the year without any sort of plan and just kind of like, write some business, cross your fingers, and hope it works out.
Yeah, and I would say you can't always stay motivated. I tell nobody is motivated all of the time. We all get it. Sales is hard. There's a psychology to it. You get burned out. It doesn't matter what kind of sales you're doing. So you can't always stay motivated, but you can always stay disciplined. And that's what I tell people too. Stay disciplined. So, if you're having a bad, sales period or something like that, if you're disciplined though with your money and your finances and you're not spending it, you're going to be in a far better place if you stay disciplined. Yep. So that's what I would always say about the spend and staying disciplined there and running your budgets and your numbers. And the same thing, whatever your number is, always try to overshoot it by about 20%. That's what I tell people to do, because I run far too often into agents who are like, here's how many I have to sell in order to hit my nut. Here's my bills. This is how much I need. They sell and work exactly to that number. And I'm like, you did not account for drop-offs, chargebacks, other expenses, other unforeseen things, and you literally worked exactly to that dollar amount, and that doesn't work. Yep. It never does. So I live in reality, not in la land. And the other thing I want to say is, just so that people understand, if you write a Medicare policy and it falls off within the first 3 months, that's a rapid disenrollment. So it's a full chargeback, every penny. It's like the sale never even occurred. If you have a policy you sell and it falls off within the first 12 months, they call that a prorated chargeback. So, let's say within 6 months it falls off. They're not going to charge you back the entire thing, but they're going to charge you back a prorated amount for that. So just so that people are clear, you're always going to have to account for, as you're actively selling and as you're making more revenue coming in, there's always that element of a certain percentage of your sales that is going to continue to be applied against your future earnings with your chargebacks. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk, to continue on about the couple of the agent population right now, because I would say a lot of agents that are out in the wind or looking for opportunities right now are in two situations, right? They got licensed. Sometimes they're barely able to scrape together the costs to get licensed and get AHIP done. And then they're out there, trying to navigate the situation that we just talked about, and they don't have that money. And so, they'll get contracted with us or somebody else. And literally by the time the carriers can even process their carrier contracts, you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks before you can actually start submitting business. And then probably, depending on the carrier, another 2 weeks to months to get paid that money. And a lot of times those agents, they've had to go, they're working somewhere else by the time they're even, green light ready to go. Or you get a lot of agents that are working in a W-2 type environment, and they get fed up with something, they got, a commission dispute or something, they got burned out.
Don't like the manager.
They don't like the manager, or they think, hey, I'm pretty good at this, I can go do this on my own. And they quit, and they're going to go independent and work for themselves, but they don't have $1 saved to make that transition, So this is a little bit of a cautionary tale. We'd love to, we love having new agents and stuff, but that's just, we're trying to help you avoid these pitfalls and navigate yourself, give yourself a best chance of success. Because, for example, we had one of our, I would say, very good success stories over the past 3 or 4 years, left that environment of a W-2 position and went and got a $20,000 personal loan just so they could make sure they didn't have necessarily the money or the structure, but they bet on themselves. They gave themselves a little bit of a bridge loan to go hard and
it also put more pressure on themselves to deliver.
Yes, because now they've got debt there that they got to pay off. So that agent paid that off and way more in the first annual enrollment, and then was able to make that transition, and is now making multi 6 figures. Yeah. So but you have to know the numbers and navigate around that. How about ACA, not just like Medicare?
Yeah, and that's where I was going next. So Medicare is its own thing, and also know that bookkeeping and tracking your commissions is important. And I always tell people, it doesn't matter if you're a solo business owner, you're just an independent agent, or you're running a whole team, regardless of it, you should always be running your expected versus received. So like if I'm selling a policy, I expect to earn X, but if I received a different amount, you should ask the carrier and track it and go, why? Why did I get a different amount? So there's a difference versus received versus expected. And then also be tracking, like you're always going to have your sales that you're making, that you're going, okay, if I didn't get it paid on this month or this thing, there's still a chance it's coming next month. And so you always have your future earnings and your accounts receivable on those commissions that you will get. You're just not getting it yet. So it's always important to be tracking all those revenue amounts. When it comes to and Medicare's more difficult and convoluted because they're advancing a commission, they're prorating, they're charging back. They're, some carriers, I'll give you an example. United Healthcare uses the true accounting method. They give you a weird prorated amount. Then on the next cycle, when they pay, they'll charge that amount back, then reissue the full amount. And so you'll see 3 transactions. Humana will give you first half, second half. So instead of giving you a weird amount, charging back, and giving you a full amount, they just pay half and then second half. So different carriers have different flavors and ways of paying as well. And so there's a lot to learn. ACA is easier. It just is, because they go as earned. And so there's no commission advance. So with ACA, you have a per member per month commission, and whatever month it's going to be effective, let's say I write an ACA policy for a January 1st effective. Well, I just know that February, I'm going to get paid that per member per month, and they're always a month in the rear. So whatever I have active in January, I'm going to get a check for in February, and so on and so forth. And so I just get that. And if they ever fall off, they're just not on my statement. And so ACA is much easier to track your commissions that way, but again, slower, because even though Medicare does prorate, they're at least giving that commission advance. And with the ACA, there's absolutely no advance. There's just that monthly per member per month commission, and it's always delayed. I will say also in ACA, there's some bonus apps sometimes. If you're writing through Health Sherpa, be aware there'll be bulletins they put out there, and there's carriers that will do incentives like, hey, we'll give you an extra bonus, these many dollars per app on ACA. And then there's also sometimes some carriers based on quality or volume where they'll give you like a percentage bonus on your overall book of business. So that's in general the ACA commissions.
Yeah, but I would just say, to Dan's point, I ran like a ledger, a Facebook or a Google spreadsheet. I still have it. I still utilize it, where I knew every dollar that I was owed on a policy that I wrote, how much I was expecting on it, and then I'd mark it paid if and when I got that, and then if I, like Dan said, if it went a month or two past when I should have been expecting that commission, then it was something that I knew I had to follow up on. But at any given time, I could always tell you exactly how much money I had coming to me, exactly, how much money from which carrier I was expecting it to get paid from, and then also running a concurrent amount of how many of my clients were active, how much dollar amount in residuals I'm expecting. And then, we've told people, for me, it like changed my life when I was able to first pay for my cell phone, and then my car, and then finally my house payment, and then all my bills, and I'm sure it was the same with you, but it makes it's very motivating too when you're actually running proper bills and proper accounting, and you know what your numbers are, because we see all the time a lot of agents just bewilderingly write business and cross their fingers and are like, I don't know if I got paid on it or whatever.
That's right.
I submitted X amount of applications
and I got a deposit.
Hope I get paid on these someday, Well,
even it can be as easy as like green, red, yellow. Like it could be a sheet that you track on every policy that's like, red is I've never, like highlight the row or whatever, like I've never been paid on this policy. Green is like, I'm good, I've been paid exactly as I was supposed to. And yellow, like I got paid partial, or this amount isn't matching what I was expecting. Something even that stupid easy is just, as long as you're tracking it and knowing like, hey, here's this portion of unpaid commissions or partial paid commissions, and I have this chunk of money that I think is coming my way. The last thing I would add to that is I see it often where agents are like, well, I should be getting paid this money hypothetically or in theory, so I'm therefore now not going to work because I should have $2,000 coming my way. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't control if the carrier is going to pay that in 2 weeks or 2 months, and you might have to sometimes with carriers go back and forth, submit a ticket, fight and dispute for the commission. It happens all the time. Yep. And in the meantime, you're not selling because you're expecting the money. You still have to remain and keep selling. And in my mind, the way I always did it is as soon as that carrier finally pays it, that's great. That's bonus. I'm finally getting the money, but I'm not depending on that. I'm still going to go operate and pretend like I'm not going to get that money, and I got to go make new money to make sure I can pay all my bills.
Yep. The way that I ran it too was I had like my initial commission. If it was a true up, how much that true up bonus should have been. Did I do an HRA on it? What other monies would be expecting on it? And each one had a dollar amount, and if it was prorated, and then I'd mark next to that, if it had been paid. And we'll find oftentimes that sometimes you thought it was going to be a true up, but it wasn't for this reason or that. Right. And that is one thing I will say about that has got better is the true ups are actually paid out more. It used to just be if they were new turning 65. And now it's pretty much if they haven't been on an Advantage plan in the past 2 years, it'll generally pay that true up again. But there's you just got to know, it's very critical to your success to understand and know how the compensation is actually paid out.
Yeah, and that's the one thing you never, we call it the cardinal sin. Don't mess with people's money, right? And people listening are going to say like, yeah, absolutely. There's carriers where or products or whatever where they've not gotten paid correctly on. And guess what? As soon as they don't get paid right, they stop selling it.
Well, yep, right? And that's the final point I'll make is we'll find very often that agents, especially new agents, will have one sell or one policy pending that they're waiting to get paid on, or they got paid on 8 out of 9, and then they're going to spend so much time and mental energy and follow through and blowing us up and blowing the carrier up and protesting that they made it 10 times worse by not just like, knowing that's going to that money's going to come or get taken care of, and just kind of moving on and dealing with that.
16 hours trying to get paid on one policy, and they could have gotten 3 new policies in the same amount of work.
Yes, and it's like, I'm not saying just give up on it, but those things they're going to work their way through. If they're going through a commission department or something like that. But I'm like, man, I wish you worked as hard to sell new business and prospect as you did to get paid on that one HRA that the carrier shorted you on. You know what I mean?
And I'm going to add 2 caveats to this so far too, just for...
I know what triggered you.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be 2 caveats I'm going to add to this. The first one is, we're speaking in generalities, right? Like we're we're talking about commissions and how carriers pay and this. And I know I'm going to have a couple agents contact me and be like, actually, you were wrong because this one carrier pays this way. We're just talking in generalities. That's the first caveat that I'll add. We can probably do another podcast where we really dig into the weeds and like even show this is exactly
Go
how
through each
this
carrier specific.
Yeah. Carrier pays. So that's my first caveat, is just saying like, hey, and what was the other one I was going to add? I just
HRA.
HRAs. Well, and those change. Those amounts change from time to time too. So they're like, carriers will come out and say, hey, here's the commission for it. And then it's like, oh, we're going to up it or change it, or it's only for this product or that product. Oh, it's also not for plan changes. So if it's already our member and you put them to a different plan at the plan change, not eligible. You can do the HRA, but we're not going to pay you for it. So there's all these little...
Some carriers don't show who it's paid for, who it's attached to. You know, we've had personal experiences.
Visibility on it sucks.
Yeah, where I'm like, I wrote, 50 HRAs with this carrier and I got paid 34 of them. Who they were and who I didn't get paid on, I don't know. But good luck tracking that down with a Fortune 50 company, and telling them. So there's, HRAs are a little bit of a, I just always view that as kind of like bonus money, I guess, a little bit.
Well, and I always tell agents too, like, in fact, I said, look, if you actually did an HRA 100% of the time, you're almost going to have enough cash to offset your chargebacks and stuff like that that are dropping off. If you have like anywhere from 15 to 40% of your plan, depending, some agents are great and they have phenomenal retention and they're retaining like 90% of their business. Others, I don't understand it, but they just write a policy and they're just like, I cross my fingers and hope that they're on that plan. They never talk to them. They don't do retention efforts. They're only keeping maybe 60% of their business. It's like throwing it against the wall. And at least if you're doing your HRAs, it's going to help offset that money. Yep. You know what I mean? So anyways, that's just what I would add out there. So far on talking agent commissions, it's extremely important to follow up, know your numbers, know your commissions, know what to expect. Yeah, and disclaimer, these numbers always change. This may not be accurate when you're listening to it, and we don't have all the exact figures before us. Disclaimer. All right. Catch y'all soon.
Agent